About 14,000 of those jobs were added in May alone. Why is it growing so fast? Because Americans are
7月5日金曜日、現在は夜の21時25分を回るところになります。あと5分少々でアメリカの雇用統計の発表の時間ということになりましたけども、本日の雇用統計ですね、事前予想出てまして、6月の非農業部門雇用者数が事前予想でプラス 16.5 万人で、6月のアメリカの失業率が 7.5% という事前予想が出てますね。前回がプラスの 17.5 万人だったので、それよりは1万人ほど低い予想ですかね。それでもプラスはプラスですけども。で、前回の失業率が 7.6% だったところが今回の事前予想では 7.5% ということなので 0.1 ポイントほど改善すると、失業率の方が改善するという予想に、なってますね。一応参考情報として、水曜日に発表された6月の ADP 全国雇用者数ですけども、こちらは事前予想がプラスの16万人のところがですね、プラスの 18.8 万人ということで、事前予想に比べてちょっと、上振れしたかなというような、感じの数字でしたね。ここのところのその、週間の新規失業保険申請件数とかを見ているとですね、だいたいフラット35万件ぐらいでずっと来ていると思いますので、今回はそんなに、めちゃくちゃ悪い、数字が出るっていうことはないんじゃないかなと、思ってますね。現在レートがですね、ユーロドルが 1.28 の82、ドル円が100円の11銭、ユーロ円が128円の98銭、オージードルが 0.91 の75で推移してますけども、ドル円が、とりあえず100円、今なんとか維持しているような状況ですけども、いい数字が出てですね、このまま、100円、101円、102円とですね、どんどんこう、上値を追っていってほしいなっていうのは個人的には思ってますね。仮に、ドル円が円安方向に動くとなるとですね、ユーロドルの方はやっぱり、下落圧力の方が強くなってしまうかなという感じなので、今ちょうど 1.28 の後半、今7級ですけども、そこら辺で推移してますけども、ここも割り込むってなるとですね、次のターゲットである 1.27 ちょうどぐらいまでは、行く可能性もあるかなという感じで見てますね。今日ここまで、金曜日、5日の金曜日ですけども、今日ここまでの流れとしてはですね、各通貨ともやっぱり雇用統計を控えてっていうのもありましたからね、ずっと小動き推移でしたね。水準自体もほとんど、各通貨変わらず来てましたので、やっぱり、昨日あとそれでアメリカが独立記念日で全部市場が休みだったっていうのもありましたから、昨日の欧州市場、ロンドンフィックス以降ぐらいからはですね、もうほとんど値動きがないと言っていいような状況でここまで来てますので、そういう意味でもですね、ちょっと雇用統計でサクッと、動いてほしいなっていうのは、ありますね。あと1分少々で、指標の発表時間となりますので、ちょっと発表の瞬間をですね、待ちたいと思います。
Bolivia is fed up with the global manhunt for Edward Snowden after President Evo Morales' flight from Moscow was diverted when the fugitive was thought to be on board. He's now threatening to close the U.S. embassy. Presidents from across Latin America are demanding an apology from the U.S. Samsung being punished in the markets after its flagship Galaxy S4 fell short of expectations. This took a $400 million chunk out of second quarter results, prompting more analysts to downgrade profit forecast for the smartphone maker. Now, those job numbers are now just seconds away. Still with us, Gluskin Chef Chief Economist David Rosenberg. Also here with us is Bob Bauer. He's the Chief Global Economist at Principal Global Investors. Markets reporter Dominic Chu standing by with the investor, the market reaction. Economics editor Mike McKee will have the real deal on the economy. And Washington correspondent Megan Hughes is live at the Labor Department with those numbers. Now remember, 165,000 jobs are expected to have been created in the month of June. The unemployment rate at 7.5%. Megan?
195,000 jobs were added to the U.S. economy in June, Betty. That's beating economists' estimates of 165,000. Also, a big revision for the month of May. 195,000 jobs added in May. Originally, that was reported as 175,000 jobs. Some big additions, some big gains were made to leisure and hospitality. Now, if you break down the June numbers, 202,000 private sector jobs were added to the economy. The big loser continues to be at the government level. 7,000 total.
数字出てきましたね。非農業部門雇用者数がプラスの19万5千人ですね。で、失業率が 7.5% で改善ですね。事前予想は非農業部門雇用者数がプラスの16万5千人だったんで、3万人ほどプラスという数字が出てますね。プラスの19万5千人で、失業率が 7.5% という、結果になってますね。
195,000 jobs added in May as well as June. The unemployment rate, though, for both months stays at 7.6%. So unchanged. The number of unemployed, 11.8 million. That's held pretty steady since February.
それを受けてドル円は上昇してますね。ドル円上昇しててユーロドル下落という状況になってますね。いい結果が出て円安方向に動いて、ユーロドルだとドルが買われてユーロが売られてという状況なので、下落してというような、一応想定されてたような感じの値動きに今のところはなってますね。
Megan Hughes at the Labor Department. And Dom, I was watching the markets, and remember the volume is thin, but so we did see a spike right after these numbers.
We did. It wasn't very much, maybe a point or two to the upside for S&P futures, but we were still hovering near session highs before. We're now about 14 points to the upside. You can see again, still near session highs, but not as dramatic of a move on that beat for jobs. Where you are seeing a massive move, at least in the grand scheme of things, is on the Treasury side. Yields for the 10-year U.S. government note up now to 2.63%. They were up about 6 basis points going into this number. They're up now 13 basis points. And as you can see here, a sharp move to the upside for those yields. Again, people selling off U.S. government notes and really just pushing up Treasury yields to 2.63%. Those are session highs now for those 10-year government notes. On the currency side, watch what's happening to the dollar. The euro now weaker versus the U.S. dollar. You're seeing $1.2824, a sharp drop in euros versus the U.S. dollar. And one more check here on commodities. Crude oil, 102.05, so still up about 1% here. Bullishness there. Gold futures now doubling their losses. They were down about 1% before. They're now down 2% to 12.26, the last trade, Betty, for gold futures.
Okay, Dom, stay with me. I want to bring in Mike now, who's been going through the numbers as well as Megan has. And, you know, Mike, I'm staring at the 70,000 net revision that, of added jobs in April and May. That's pretty significant.
That is very significant, and I'll tell you why. Jeremy Stein, the Fed governor, gave a speech last week where he said we're not looking at any one month. We're looking at the totality of how the data have come together over the previous several months, and this just shows you that the economy has been stronger for longer than they thought, which adds momentum to the idea of a September tapering. You're going to see that priced into the markets today, a lot of it based on this revision. The unemployment rate, yes, it stays the same, but the participation rate, the number of people who have been actively looking for work, getting jobs, goes up by 1/10. That's good news. That's also what the Fed wants to see. The other numbers of note, really strong hourly earnings, 4/10. It tells you that people are able to continue spending. They have the funding to get out there and spend. That is really going to matter to the Fed as well. Taking a look at the breakdown of jobs, about what we'd expect. Interesting note, manufacturing jobs fall a little bit, but manufacturing hours worked rise. So they may be feeling a little pressure there that will bring manufacturing hiring back as well. And we also see a smaller than expected drop perhaps in government jobs. Maybe the sequester not going to hit as hard as people thought. We'll have to rethink job predictions going into the months ahead. So all in all, Betty, this is a very strong report, and it plays exactly into the hands of those who see an early tapering.
It is a strong report indeed, Mike. I know you're staying with me, Megan, as well at the Labor Department. I want to bring in now our economist, Bob Bauer, the chief global economist at Principal Global Investors. Also, as I mentioned, Gluskin Chef, chief economist David Rosenberg. Bob, let me start with you because we haven't heard from you yet. I mean, these numbers, as we were just talking about, pretty strong. Does that mean that tapering is sooner rather than later?
Good morning, Betty. We think tapering probably will start in September a little bit. This was a very positive jobs report. It fits very nicely with our idea that we'll have stronger growth in the second half. There's quite a bit of the United States, whether it's manufacturing, oil production, housing construction.
Yeah.
There's pent-up consumer demand. We think we'll see a stronger economy, and this is just another evidence of that.
And David, you know, you were on the money. You said, look, I have this feeling from all these numbers that we've been seeing ahead of these jobs numbers that we're going to get a surprise to the upside. Is this even more than what you had kind of estimated?
Well, just the old saying, you're only as good as your last call. So maybe I shouldn't say anything. It was about in line with what I thought we were going to see. Of course, you know, you tack on those upward revisions, and I think Bob is quite right. This is a very firm report. Mike McKee mentioned average hourly earnings. The work week was flat. When you take a look at the what I call work-related pay, when I take a look at the income coming out of the number, because it's not always just about jobs, right, Betty? The market will trade initially off jobs, but it's what is the income for the working class that came out of this number? Up 0.4% month to month. That's the best we've seen since February. Looking at the year-over-year trend in average weekly earnings, it was 2% in April, 2.3% in May, 2.5% in June. In an environment where there's hardly any inflation, that's pretty decent organic real purchasing power for the proletariat. So I think this is going to feed well into consumer spending as we move through the summer months.
David and Bob, does this, do you think, push maybe the Fed to go in the direction of Narayana Kocherlakota and lower their threshold to 5.5 on the theory that you might get to 6.5% unemployment a little faster than you want?
Well, we thought originally
I don't think this number.
We thought originally we'd see 6.5% probably late summer next year, but if the participation rate's going to rise along with faster job growth, I think the Fed will keep it at 6.5.
David?
I would tend to agree with that. This number didn't tell you that they have to go to 5.5%, and I think there's enough evidence, Mike, to suggest that NAIRU, or the full unemployment rate, probably in this cycle where there was no real capital deepening by the business sector, waiting to get to 5.5%, you're talking about wanting to build into a new and higher inflationary cycle that we'll have to deal with in the future. That sort of policy to wait to 5.5%, to me that's a danger zone. Remember, the Fed brought this policy in December ahead of the tail risk of a fiscal cliff. We didn't get a fiscal cliff, right? We got a fiscal hill, and we're actually moving through it very nicely. So we have a monetary policy that's geared for a destabilizing, deflationary economy, Mike, and simply put, we don't have it. We have an economy that's growing moderately and probably picking up some steam as we move into the second half of the year.
David, thank you for joining us and staying through the numbers. David Rosenberg, Gluskin Chef, chief economist, and also Bob Bauer staying with us, the chief global economist for Principal Global Investors, as well as our team coverage. What will the White House have to say about the jobs report? In a few moments, we're going to talk with the chairman of President Obama's Council of Economic Advisors, Alan Krueger, joining us. And it is one of the most important additions to McDonald's menu in years. We're going to tell you why the McWrap may be the key to attracting young consumers.
雇用統計発表50分、経過しましたけども、6月の非農業部門雇用者数がプラスの19万5000人、で失業率が、7.5% でしたね。雇用者数の方は、事前予想プラスの 16.5 万人だったので、3万人ほど、多い結果になってます。あと失業率の方は事前予想が 7.6% だったので、こちらも 7.5% なので 0.1 ポイント、改善してますね。で、それを受けて、為替市場の方はですね、ドルが全面的に買われてますね。ドル円は今もう101円台、突入してますし、ユーロドルもですね、1.28 の後半から1.28 の前半まで、落ちてきてますので、ちょっと完全に、ドル買いの流れに、現在為替市場、なっております。
Well, as we mentioned, the jobs report coming in much better than expected. We saw 195,000 jobs created in the month of June, 70,000 added for April and May together. Joining us again is Robert Bauer. He's the Chief Global Economist at Principal Global Investors. Market reporter Dominic Chu keeping his eye on how futures are trading. We saw an initial pop right after those numbers. Washington correspondent Megan Hughes live at the Labor Department. Megan, I know you've been going through these numbers and the report even more, several pages to get through. One thing that's sticking out to you is this long-term unemployment and the changes going on there.
That's right. And you know that, Betty, that's an indicator that we talk so much about is the problem of long-term unemployment. So the report looks specifically at people who have been out of work more than 27 weeks. That number unchanged, around 4.3 million workers or unemployed. But what was interesting, if you look at the average duration of unemployment and the median duration of unemployment, both of those numbers down from June compared to the May numbers. So some positive indicators there. Betty?
Okay. Let me bring back Bob. Bob, you know, one of the things, though, that markets tend to really focus on and just in the public is this jobless rate, which is still stuck at this stubborn 7.5%, 7.6%. And I know we talked about a decline coming and what that indicates for the Fed. But in the meantime, I mean, how long are we going to be sort of stuck around this level, given that we are seeing acceleration in the number of added jobs?
Well, I think it all depends on the participation rate. You had mentioned it, or in the last segment, you had mentioned it ticked up by a tenth. That's actually a good thing because it means that people are beginning to get some confidence in the job market, and they're starting to come back and looking for a job, people who may have been discouraged before. So in some sense, the fact that we're having good job growth and maybe not a fast declining unemployment rate, that actually might be a positive thing.
And do you think, Bob, that we have pretty much seen the jobs impact of sequestration, or is there more to come here?
No, I think we've seen all of that the sequestration might come up with. I just don't think there'll be anything following up on this. So I think that the effect of sequestration is not nearly as big as what people had said. I might point out, take off on one thing that David Rosenberg had mentioned. You know, the Fed focusing on unemployment is almost a mistake in some sense, in that unemployment is the most lagging of all lagging indicators.
Yes.
And monetary policy, you know, leads the economy by 12, 18 to 24 months. So in some sense, making a decision on monetary policy with a lagging indicator can get you in some hot water at some point.
It can. It can also be very confusing then as well. Bob, thank you for joining us. Appreciate it. Bob Bauer, the Chief Global Economist for Principal Global Investors. on the jobs report. Now, staying in Washington on a different issue, hardcore Tesla fans are writing to the White House saying they want Elon Musk to win the war against car dealers around the country. Will the electric car maker get its way? We're going to have the details on that developing story. And he's 2 tennis matches away from a once-in-a-lifetime payday. We're going to tell you how Andy Murray will cash in big time if he can win Wimbledon. Well, let's switch gears from talking about jobs to Tesla. The electric car maker has been trying to sell its cars directly to consumers online or through its stores. They're bypassing franchise dealerships. A White House petition to allow Tesla's direct-to-consumer sales approach just got the 100,000 signatures required to trigger a response from the president. But whether the federal government has the authority over states on how they handle auto sales is up for debate. I want to bring in Bloomberg News' Detroit bureau chief Jeff Green on the story. Jeff, great to have you here talking about this. And does the federal government have any authority over these states on how they manage car dealerships and auto sales?
Not really. This is a state rights issue, and the dealers are very strong in the states, and that's where this issue will be played out. It's kind of a symbolic thing. The same system allowed people who supported the United States building a Death Star, like from Star Wars, to have a petition that forced the government to respond. So it's more of a publicity stunt. But for Tesla, that's kind of important. I mean, this is a company that's all about publicity and positioning, if it's about anything.
Well, but this did not originate, right, from Tesla itself. This was a Tesla owner, is that right?
I mean, Tesla probably is, finds this very helpful, but not necessarily very useful in the bigger sense. There's about 17,000 dealers in this country, and they're all basically millionaires. So they have a lot of power locally.
雇用統計発表から20分ほど経過してますけども、6月のアメリカの雇用統計ですね、6月アメリカの非農業部門雇用者数はプラスの19万5000人、プラスの19万5000人で、失業率が 7.5%、7.5% になっております。これを受けてですね、為替市場は、完全にドル買い優勢の、展開になっておりまして、ドル円は現在101円の11銭、ユーロドルが 1.28 の13で推移してますね。ユーロ円はあんまり動いてないですかね。129円の54銭で今推移してますね。で、あと、オージードルもちょっと蚊帳の外ですかね。0.91 の04で推移してますけども、値動きの中心は、ユーロドルとドル円になってますね。ユーロ、すいません、ドル円の方ですね。ドル円は、水曜日にですね、ちょうど、ここのドタカネ、100円の84銭っていうのがありますけども、ここドタカネにしてですね、欧州時間で東京全否定で一気に売られたという経緯がありますから、とりあえず今日の引け値でですね、100円の80銭、85銭ですかね、ぐらいは上回ってくれるとですね、ちょっと来週の展開が面白くなってくるかなという感じにはなりますね。ちょっと4時間で見たいと思いますけども、今ちょうど、レジスタンス3の攻防をやってますので、ここも抜けてくれるとですね、ちょっと次上値ってなると102円あたりが、視野に入ってくるかなという感じかと思われますね。102円はともかくですね、とりあえず今日の引け値で100円の85銭以上で引けてくれるとですね、ちょっと理想的な、展開になるかなという感じですね、ドル円の方は。逆にユーロドルの方はですね、ずっと下がってますけども、今ちょうど、レジスタンスじゃない、すみません、サポートの4ですね、サポートの4をトライしようかというようなところに来てますね。4時間でちょっと見たいと思いますけども、そうですね、サポートの4を今抜けるか抜けないかみたいなところでせめぎ合いをしてますけども、このサポートの4抜けるとですね、次は 1.27 ちょうどっていうのが週足でのターゲットになってくると思われますので、ここあたりですね。これもそうですね。このサポートの4ですね。日足、4時間足のサポートの4を抜ける、今攻防しているところですね。ちょっとここ抜けてくれると面白いかなっていうのは、ユーロドルの方の、チャートですね。ユーロドル、ドル円とも、どちらにしろも、完全に、ドル買いの、流れになってますね。ダウ先の方も、プラスで、今推移してますので、ダウ先はプラスの159ドルで、今推移してますから、この後ニューヨークダウ始まって、現物始まってもですね、好調な流れそのまま続くと思いますので、ちょっとこの、そうですね、ドル円は今101円、を定着しようかどうかってとこですし、ユーロドルに関しては、このサポートの4ですね、サポートの4を抜きかかってますから、ちょっと面白くなってきたかなという感じですね。流れはもう完全に、ドル買いの方向に、傾きつつありますね。逆に、ユーロ円は、両方の通貨の動きが、逆ですからね、ちょっと一番動きづらいようなパターンになってますね。あと、オージードルもちょっと蚊帳の外って感じですね。値動きの中心はドル円とユーロドルのドル買いの流れになっております。
Our Bloomberg big number is $75 million. That is how much British tennis star Andy Murray may earn a year for becoming a Wimbledon champion. The UK has been waiting 77 years for one of their own to win the sport's most elite match. So we'll see if Murray lifts the men's champion trophy on July 7th. A lot happening there. And it's not just Andy Murray who's competing in London. Five Guys and Shake Shack are both opening up their first restaurants in the UK this week. Bloomberg's Jessica Howard went to check out the rivalry that's cooking abroad.
Welcome to Burger School. It's training day at Five Guys in London's Covent Garden.
We only do two things, so we're fanatical about those two things. Burgers and fries. I mean, that's what we do, and we try to do them really good.
Jerry Murrell opened the first Five Guys in 1986. There are 1,200 now. It's America's fastest growing restaurant chain. This is the Burger Baron's first foray abroad, convinced by Carphone Warehouse founder Charles Dunstan and his deputy.
They brought me over here screaming and kicking. I was afraid to go overseas, but they came over and convinced us that they'd be good partners.
320 metres down the road, or 4 minutes walk, another big name in American burgers opens today, Shake Shack.
We're used to having Five Guys as great neighbors in the U.S. almost wherever we open. The fact that we're both coming to this great city at the same time is a coincidence.
Not quite fast food, not quite fine dining. It's boom time for posh burgers. The segment's worth an estimated $2 billion in the US. London's already sizzling with successful local chains. So is there room for two more?
We're not really worried about what other people are doing. We worry about taking care of our guests and our team every day. If you just do a great job, there's enough people in London to fill great restaurants.
I'm getting hungry for a burger here this morning. All right, now hot dogs and burgers, you'll want to check out the latest edition of Titans at the Table. At one point, I asked Mario Batali to make a meal out of New York City hot dogs, so tune in to see what he made. Rachel Ray, Batali, Bobby Flay, and Tom Colicchio dishing with me on their industry. It's all on Bloomberg.com/TV or downloaded on your BTV Plus iPad app. Coming up, a Samsung surprise. The world's biggest maker of smartphones missing earnings estimates. We'll have more in a moment.
Minutes to the opening bell. This is In the Loop with Betty Lou. The countdown begins right now.
Welcome back. You're in the loop. Equity futures are